In an earlier discussion, we examined the rise of the Germanic kingdoms that emerged from the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Now we turn to one of the most significant and enduring of those kingdoms, the Franks. Originally, the Franks were not a single people united under one ruler. Instead, they consisted of several small, politically independent bands, each led by its own chief. Although fragmented, these groups shared a common Germanic dialect, culture, and way of life. They belonged to the Western Germanic world and lived along the lower Rhine River, just beyond the borders of Roman Gaul. By around 350 CE, the Romans, struggling to defend their frontiers, began to permit some Frankish groups to settle inside Gaul itself. In exchange, the Franks supplied soldiers to the Roman army and generally remained loyal to the Western emperors, at least for as long as those emperors were able to maintain authority. This relationship tied the Franks closely to the fate of the Western Roman Empire. When the last Western Roman emperor was deposed in 476, that fragile balance collapsed. Out of the political vacuum emerged a powerful Frankish leader named Clovis. Unlike earlier chiefs, Clovis succeeded in uniting the various Frankish groups, both those settled in Gaul and those living east of the Rhine, into a single, independent kingdom. He went further, conquering most of Gaul by defeating rival Germanic rulers, including the Visigoths in the south. In doing so, Clovis laid the foundations of what became known as the Kingdom of the Franks. This early Frankish state is known as the Merovingian dynasty, named after Clovis's family line. The Merovingians ruled from 481 to 751 and, in some respects, were more successful than other Germanic rulers. They managed to avoid rapid fragmentation and maintained control over a large and wealthy territory. Yet they could not escape a fundamental challenge shared by all Germanic kingdoms: the deep-rooted independence of their nobility. Frankish nobles saw themselves not as subjects, but as the equals of the king. Many were powerful warriors with their own followings, resistant to efforts to create a centralized state. As a result, Merovingian kings had to be strong military leaders and skillful politicians just to hold their throne. Over time, however, royal authority weakened. Loyalty to the Merovingian bloodline kept the dynasty in place for generations, even as individual kings grew increasingly ineffective. Eventually, that loyalty eroded. By the mid-8th century, real power had shifted to the hands of leading nobles. One of these figures, Pepin the Short, decided to end Merovingian rule altogether. In 751, Pepin persuaded the Frankish nobles to depose the last Merovingian king and elect him as ruler. Although legally elected, Pepin understood that replacing a dynasty that had ruled for nearly 3 centuries posed a serious problem of legitimacy. Many Franks might still question his right to rule. To secure his position, Pepin turned to the most respected source of moral authority in Western Europe, the Pope. At the time, the papacy was itself in crisis. Around 750, the Lombards, who controlled northern Italy, invaded central Italy and seized territory surrounding Rome. Although Rome remained, in theory, part of the Eastern Roman Empire, the emperors in Constantinople were no longer reliable protectors. Relations had deteriorated sharply since 726, when the emperors initiated iconoclasm, the destruction of religious images, and policy many popes strongly opposed. Cut off from imperial support, the pope needed a new ally. Pepin and Pope Stephen II struck a political and religious bargain. The pope agreed to formally recognize Pepin as king of the Franks and grant him religious legitimacy. In return, Pepin promised to invade Italy, defeat the Lombards, and restore the lands they had taken from the papacy. Pepin fulfilled his promise. In 756, he drove the Lombards out of central Italy, but instead of returning the territory to the Eastern Roman Empire, he handed it over to the Pope. This act, known as the Donation of Pepin, created the Papal States, granting the Pope's territorial control and political independence for the first time. Just as importantly, it established a powerful precedent: the idea that popes could legitimize kings and even remove them. This principle would shape medieval politics for centuries. With the Merovingians removed and Pepin securely recognized as king, a new dynasty took shape, the Carolingians. While this family would reach its greatest height under Pepin's son, Charlemagne, its foundation was laid through Pepin's consolidation of Frankish power and his alliance with the papacy. Together they created a political and religious partnership that would define much of early medieval Europe.